Okay, so when I say White Star Line, I'm guessing one very specific, very famous ship just popped into your head, right? Of course. But the real story, wow, it is so much bigger than that. We're talking about a saga of incredible innovation, a rivalry that literally defined an era, and a legacy that goes way, way beyond a single tragic night. So let's dive into this amazing story of ambition on the high seas. Speed or luxury? That was the question, wasn't it? Right at the heart of the golden age of ocean liners. If you wanted to conquer the North Atlantic, you had to pick a side. Were you going to build the fastest ship out there? A sleek greyhound of the sea? Or were you going to build a floating palace, a place where the journey was the whole point? That single choice, right there, would spark one of the biggest corporate rivalries of the entire 20th century. And for White Star, it all starts with one man and his vision. To really get what this company was all about, we've got to go back to its rebirth in the 1860s. It was all driven by a founder who looked at the future of travel and didn't see old wooden sailing ships. He saw iron, and he saw steam. Okay, so check this out. In 1868, a guy named Thomas Henry Ismay buys the name and flag of a totally bankrupt company, the White Star Line, for just £1,000. A steal. But then he makes an absolutely brilliant move. He strikes this groundbreaking deal with the shipbuilders Harlan and Wolff, and the deal was so simple, yet so genius. Harlan and Wolff would build all of White Star's ships, basically at cost, plus a fixed profit. What did that do? Well, it locked in a super trusted builder and gave them the freedom for incredible innovation. Honestly, this one partnership would change shipbuilding forever. So, when their very first ship, the SS Oceanic, hits the water in 1871, people were just stunned. The press literally called it more an imperial yacht than a passenger liner. Think about that. This wasn't just another boat. It was a massive statement. White Star wasn't just trying to compete, they were changing the entire game right from the very beginning. So you're probably asking, what was so special about it? Well, it was all in the details. The Oceanic had stuff that was just unheard of back then. I mean, running water in first-class cabins, electric bells to call a steward, that was absolutely revolutionary stuff. It was clear right from this first ship what White Star's strategy was going to be. They were all about the passenger experience. And this whole idea of putting luxury way ahead of just raw speed, that wasn't just a gimmick. It became their entire business model. And, as you can imagine, it put them on a direct collision course with a very powerful rival in a massive battle for control of the Atlantic. And here's where you can really see the two different philosophies in action. On one side, you've got Cunard. They're backed by the British government with one goal: build the fastest ships in the world. We're talking about the legendary Lusitania and Mauretania. Their whole thing was getting businessmen and officials across the ocean as fast as humanly possible. Then you have White Star. They're using private money, and they deliberately chose a different route. Not the fastest, no, but the most comfortable and the most reliable. Their target audience, a whole new class of wealthy tourists who thought of the trip itself as part of the vacation. And let me tell you, their fleet of ships called the Big Four proved that this strategy was a total winner. These were the first ships ever to break the 20,000-ton barrier. Just to put that in perspective, that's more than double the weight of the Eiffel Tower. I mean, these things were massive. Yeah, they were slower, for sure, but passengers loved them. They were so big they gave a steadier, more comfortable ride. For a lot of people, arriving a day later but feeling totally refreshed and pampered, that was a way better deal. The Big Four made White Star a ton of money. And well, it's at the stage for something even bigger. So White Star had this proven formula now, right? Size and luxury equals success. So what do? They decide to double down. Big time. The plan was to create a trio of ships so enormous, so ridiculously luxurious, that they would make every other ship on the ocean look like a toy. And the story goes, it all happened over dinner in 1907. Bruce Ismay, that's the founder's son, is sitting with Lord Peary from Harland and Wolff, and they basically sketch out this insane plan. It was their ultimate answer to Cunard's fast ships. The thinking was simple. If Cunard has the fastest ships, fine, we'll have the biggest and the best, period. End of story. And you have to understand, this wasn't just one company. This was a huge international effort. It took the insane financial power of the American banker J.P. Morgan, who had actually bought White Star by then, plus the crazy ambition of Bruce Ismay and the world-class shipbuilding skills of Harlan and Wolff to pull this off. It was a real dream team. So what was the result? 3 ships: the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. Each one stretched a mind-boggling 850 feet long. And I'm not exaggerating here. They were literally the largest moving objects ever built by human hands up to that point. True titans of the sea. The launch of these ships, this was the absolute peak for White Star. This was their moment of ultimate triumph. But it was immediately followed by a tragedy so huge, so profound, that it would completely overshadow everything else the company had ever done and stain its name forever. Of course, we're talking about the sinking of the RMS Titanic on her very first voyage in April 1912. Over 1,500 people lost their lives. The sheer scale of that human cost, it just sent this massive shockwave around the globe. And suddenly, the White Star Line and its chairman, Bruce Ismay, who was actually on the ship, was put under this intense and, frankly, furious microscope. So at the American Senate inquiry, Bruce Ismay tries to explain how he, the head of the entire company, survived when so many didn't. These are his actual words. Because there was room in the boat, she was being lowered away, I felt the ship was going down, and I got into the boat. He claimed there was an empty spot, that no women or children were around. But you know what? The court of public opinion, they were not buying it. The fallout was just catastrophic. The press, especially in America, went after him hard. They painted him as a coward who pushed the captain for more speed and then saved his own skin. His reputation was completely destroyed. And for the White Star Line, the disaster was a devastating 1-2 punch, a huge financial hit, and a massive blow to the brand they'd spent decades building on reliability and, ironically, safety. Really, the loss of the Titanic was the beginning of the end. It was just the first in a whole series of crushing blows that this famous old company would just never, ever fully recover from. I mean, think about it. First, you have the Titanic. Then her sister ship, the Britannic, sinks during World War I. That same war takes out over 10 other White Star ships. After the war, just as they're trying to rebuild, bam, the Great Depression hits and the luxury travel market just evaporates. The final nail in the coffin? In 1934, the government basically forces them to merge with their oldest, bitterest rival, Cunard. And after that merger, it was really just a slow fade to black. Cunard's brand was stronger, and by the late 1940s, they'd pretty much bought out and absorbed what was left of White Star. That iconic white star on a red flag, which for decades was a symbol of the ultimate in ocean luxury, it just disappeared from the seas. So you'd think that's it, right? The story's over. The company's gone, the great ships are all at the bottom of the sea or scrapped. But here's the amazing part. One small piece of the White Star Line has actually survived, against all the odds. Meet the SS Nomadic. She was built by the very same hands at Harland & Wolff that built the Giants. Her job? She was the tender, the little ship that would ferry first and second-class passengers out to the huge liners. In fact, on April 10, 1912, it was the Nomadic that carried people like the unsinkable Molly Brown and Benjamin Guggenheim out to the Titanic just before its one and only voyage. She is, quite literally, the last of the White Star Line. And today, you can go see her. She's been fully restored, and she sits right there in Belfast, in the shadow of the Titanic Museum. The SS Nomadic stands as this final physical link to an incredible era of grand ambition and, of course, epic tragedy. A small ship carrying the weight of a very, very big story.